It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. And we are in the company of Gregory Viscusi, reporter for Bloomberg News. How are you?
Fine.
Welcome back as well to a New Zealand journalist, Catherine Field.
Thank you for having me back.
Welcome to the show. Also with us, after a busy week, Anne Mary. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
All right. And Richard Verly, Paris correspondent for Swiss daily newspaper Le Temps.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Welcome to the show. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter. Hashtag World This Week. She's been around this town for 856 years, and we all assumed she is going to last forever. That is until Monday evening, when the roof literally caved in on Notre-Dame Cathedral. The blaze started under the eaves after workers renovating the roof had clocked out for the day. It brought down part of the roof around that 19th century spire. And you know, Anne Mary, you think in those moments, because Notre-Dame it's not only a place of worship, it's located where we have kilometer zero for all the roads in France. Yeah. It's a seat of power, you might say.
It's the heart of France in many, many ways. It is, as you say, kilometer zero, from where all French distances are measured. It's in the middle of France's most important city. It is a religious symbol, but it's also a secular symbol of the endurance of the French entity, state, republic, monarchy, whatever you want to call it. I talked to a lot of people this week who were having 9/11 flashbacks while they looked at a lot of Americans who, when they watched the spire fall, had that sense of the world just changed, it will never be the same again. And I heard from a lot of people, Americans especially, for whom Notre-Dame was a symbol of the most wonderful time in their lives, either a term abroad to learn French, or a honeymoon, or an anniversary trip. Just the way Paris symbolizes something for everybody in the world, belongs to everyone in the world. Notre-Dame is very much a part of that.
Yeah, and although in this case, Gregory Viscusi, fortunately, nobody killed.
No. And no foul play.
No foul play.
No, it's very different in that respect.
And the structure has been saved. But there is this feeling that this symbol this has been struck. People were genuinely moved.
I mean, it was amazing to watch the crowds around there when I went that evening, and I've been back almost every day since then at some time, and the crowds are not going away. I mean, there's still such a mass of people hanging around, just looking at it. The odd thing is, though, is that if when you show up, you don't really see the damage at the beginning. If you come from some angles, you don't notice any difference. Okay, the spire is gone, but you don't, if you don't remember it, or it doesn't look like it should be there. In fact, it probably shouldn't have been there. It was added in the 19th century. From the front facade, you don't see any damage. Around the side, you do. When you see the burnt scaffolding, when you see some shard areas on the top, but from the front facade, it looks totally intact.
And at one point, we were wondering, is the whole structure going to collapse? The firefighters, they didn't use a Canadair. They went in and were very efficient in making these sort of walls of water.
It was incredible, wasn't it? They were pumping up 4,000 litres of water a minute to stop the flames jumping from the roof to the bell tower, because if the flames had got to that bell tower, to those incredible oak beams that hold the bells,
if the bell had come down, then that tower would have come down, and then the whole structure would have come down. And apparently they were half an hour away from that at one point.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember at one point the Paris Fire Brigade said, in the next 90 minutes are going to be crucial?
Yeah.
And all of us were just...
And then the pumping the water from the Seine, I mean, the firefighters had practiced that. They had done drills. If the cathedral catches fire, this is how we're going to do it. It was just extraordinary to watch them move into position and do so really very efficiently and so effectively, too.
Yeah, we could show images, Richard Verly, of this Friday with workers painstakingly taking out some of the largest paintings, many of which date back to the 14th century. Some 90% of relics have been saved.
True, and I think you cannot disconnect the emotion, this worldwide emotion, with the images that we have seen and with the suspense that night, because we just didn't know until very late that night, even until Tuesday morning, what was lost. We didn't know whether we knew late Monday night that the structure would be saved, but we didn't know what happened to the art pieces inside the cathedral. And you had these images of the flames coming up and again on television. It was just incredible. And another thing I think is important is, don't forget, Notre-Dame was also an icon in itself, not only a religious icon, it's a cultural icon because of the movies, because of the novels, because of the animations, the cartoons, everything. So it's in the mind of everybody, even those who have not come to Paris and they wanted to come to visit Notre-Dame.
Okay, so here's an interesting one, Leisha, because as you know, France is a country of lapsed Catholics. It's all happening during Holy Week. The services scheduled for Notre-Dame have been moved to other churches. These are images, and we can hear perhaps some of the sound of these spontaneous scenes of prayer and procession that have been going on as well every evening all week.
True, and we have all witnessed that around Notre-Dame, this group of faithful, this group of Catholics praying either at Notre-Dame site, but also in other different churches. Don't forget that when it happens, there was a mass going on in Notre-Dame. The mass starting at 6:15, and the first alarm bell rang at 6:20 something. And as you know, there was an incident because the first alarm bell was not taken seriously. There was an inspection, nothing was found, and the real alarm was triggered something like 25 minutes later.
Yeah, I think it was 10 to 7, I think.
You can just picture what happened inside that church where you had flock getting out of the cathedral while it was actually starting to burn.
All right, it was Wednesday when because we have to talk about what happens next. It was Wednesday when the mayor talked of getting Our Lady made over in time for Paris to host the 2024 Olympics. France's president even set a deadline.
We as a people are builders, and we have a lot to rebuild. So yes, we will rebuild the Notre-Dame Cathedral to be even more beautiful than before. And I want this completed within 5 years. We can do it. We will take action.
5 years, Anne Bagamary, what do you say?
I'm no expert in this, but I have consulted experts, people in the heritage community who have looked at this very carefully, and architects. And number one, they say 5 years is ambitious. And because a lot of other experts have said it's going to take 15 to 20. It'd be nice if it were finished in time for the Olympics, but come on, that's a pretty false deadline, if you like. But second, what they say is that you can't possibly set a deadline and decide what's going to be done now in this place of incredible emotion. It's still very raw. It only happened Monday. And even in the heritage community, people are saying you can't make the right decisions even about whether to reconstruct it with original materials or to use new materials. There's been a design competition announced for a new spire. Will it be modern? Will it be a replica of the old? Will it be done in lead? Will it be done with wood so it could burn again? There's no consensus on what needs to be done next. The only consensus is the communities need to come together that are affected by this, that have expertise to bring to this, and you can't make these decisions too quickly because everyone is still bleeding.
But for the type of renovation, there will be a competition, I understand.
Yes, I understand that that's the case. Yeah. And that's a fine thing to announce, as is announcing a conference for donors. The French government very quickly set up a website with approved links to which people could donate, which was a smart thing to do early on. All of that can take place now, and it's a good thing, gives people something to do with their hands, as it were. But as far as making big decisions about what to do with this structure, this beloved structure, how to rebuild it, when to rebuild it, it's way too soon.
Again, I'm no expert, but I don't see why you can't have the place be reopened within 5 years. They've got to patch a hole in the vault. They have to rebuild the roof. It doesn't seem to be impossible to do in 5 years. Not everything will be finished, but no Gothic cathedral has ever been finished. There's no such thing as a finished Gothic cathedral. No, but it's true. It's true. No Gothic cathedral was ever built to its original.
Greg, you were mentioning how that spire, which we saw come down at the beginning of the show again, it doesn't date from the Middle Ages.
No, and most of the church doesn't. It's a 19th century structure. I mean, there has been a church.
Let's talk about this. It's the work of a 19th century rebel, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. The controversies regarding his lead structure design at the time have now been rekindled, sorry for the pun, by the government's launch of that international contest to replace it. Now, before the spire went up, Louis Daguerre, the inventor of modern photography, took this snap of Notre Dame in 1839. Catherine Field, what do you think? Does it look better without a spire?
It's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't need a
It's fine.
spire.
I don't have a problem with it. You know, history is a progression. We all progress. Life goes on. You know, let's have a think about something
And Notre Dame
else.
has always been a work in progress. It was, yes, we say it's 850 years old, but it was almost torn down. It was so badly treated during the Revolution. It was
But
almost...
actually, that photograph is false because there was a spire before, and it went down during the French Revolution.
Okay.
So Viollet-le-Duc reverted to the original idea of Notre Dame with the spire before the French Revolution.
No, but it just shows that these Gothic cathedrals are all works in. They're all works in
But
progress.
one thing it says something about France. It's the president of the French Republic who set the timetable for a religious monument and a religious church. And it says a lot because the state is the owner of that French cathedral. You know, the state is owning all cathedrals in France. And the state was also and is responsible of the taking care of the monument, which is now a subject of controversy because apparently there was a lot of neglect.
Yeah, you reported on this a year ago, Catherine.
Yeah, last August, we did a TV documentary about the renovation work that was underway then. We went up onto the roof, we went up onto the balcony at the back, and it does need a lot of work. And the French state had only put in a certain amount of money, and they, in those days, last August, it seems another lifetime ago, the Friends of Notre Dame were traveling around the world picking up money. They got a lot of money from the Diocese of Boston. They were going to go to Australia as well to get money. So no one was that much interested. But if I could pick up on a point about what goes on at Notre Dame, a lot of the key services there are very ecumenical. When we think of Notre Dame, it is 1944, August 1944, when de Gaulle walked in those doors.
August 26th.
Yeah, when Paris was liberated, and they played the Magnificat. We also had de Gaulle's funeral there, Pompidou's, Mitterrand.
Yeah, the presidents of the Republic are buried there.
Yeah,
In fact, it's no
Not
longer
buried.
a
They
parish
did a
church.
ceremony
It's been
there.
removed from the list of parish churches.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they decided that it was no longer
Yeah, so
going to
it's
be a place of regular Sunday worship.
Yeah, in
because it
fact,
was
the
so important
only
to so many
real
people.
religious moment in the last decades or so has been when the Pope went there. True. John Paul II went there twice, but the rest of it's been very moments of national coming together. Remember the service they had there after the Bataclan attacks. It's really it's the nation's
And that
place of
probably
coming together.
explains the emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, the wide popular emotion.
Yeah, and it's the basis of churches. It's where people go. Communities are always flocking to church. Even lapsed Catholics like the French, as you say, they like going to church. They can all sit there. They're all weep together and get strength from one another.
Because we've heard, on the one hand, and this again tells us something about France, staunch atheists this week who've said that they're making a donation. And then we've heard blowback from others, not over the little donations, but over these vast sums of money that have been pledged by corporations and captains of industry. They've sparked a backlash in part over the tax breaks they'll be getting. That backlash has even reached a Christian charity, the Abbé Pierre Foundation.
We'd like to see a part of this generosity go not just to Notre Dame, but also to the less well-off, people who live on the streets or in overcrowded housing and need help.
Yeah, they're saying the Abbé Pierre Foundation would like to say, how about giving us 1% of that money?
I don't know how much it's going to cost to the renovation, but I think there's a chance they could turn a profit on this. I mean, but donations are...
At the moment, they are warning against
up to,
crooks.
There's
You have
something,
all
yeah,
received
there are.
emails.
But donations are up to about 800 million. I mean, okay, Windsor Castle cost 37 million pounds to renovate. Let's say this costs 10 times as much. That's still a lot less than what they've raised so far. So, yeah, why not turn a little bit of money over to other causes? I don't know.
Because the day after, first we had this pledge from François Pinault, one of the country's richest men. He's a luxury goods magnate. And then his big rival, Bernard Arnault, says 200 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is always a debate around philanthropy. Does the money go? The money is given for a variety of reasons, including image burnishing, including tax breaks, and also just because people they want to give back. It's certainly the Anglo-Saxon view of philanthropy. And there's always a question of whether the money is going to go to where it's needed most or it's just going to go where the philanthropists want to send it. There are plenty of philanthropists out there who are giving money to worthy causes and don't want any edifices erected to them in return. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of someone like Bill Gates, who does give money to the most desperate cases and gives lots of it too. There are people who want to give money and have their name attached to it. I understand that Pinault and Arnaud have either renounced tax breaks on their donations to Notre-Dame, or in the case of Arnaud, I believe he said, no, we've already topped out our tax-deductible donations this year, so we're not going to get any tax break from this. I think it's important. There's a French expression, il faut pas tout mélanger.
Don't mix everything up.
Don't mix everything up. There is philanthropy that goes for certain perfectly worthy reasons. There's philanthropy that is enlightened self-interest, and it's true that tax. You can argue. I think there's a perfectly legitimate argument to be made that tax money is what should be supporting benefits for everyone in the society. Now, if you want to talk about tax policy, the wealth tax, and whether there's income inequality,
and we've been doing that a lot, by the way,
yes,
with the Yellow Vest movement.
And if you want to talk about that, I think that's a perfectly legitimate discussion to have. Does it actually color what's going on with Notre-Dame? I think some people would like to say that it should. I'm not sure that you can tout mélanger in that sense.
Richard Verly?
Yeah, two remarks. I believe the call from the Abbé Pierre Foundation will certainly be heard by the church. And as you just said, I am pretty sure a percentage of that money collected will go to social projects beyond the renovation of Notre-Dame. It's just normal, and I'm sure the Catholic Church will do so. Secondly, the French tend to forget that huge renovation, restoration work in the past have been financed by foreign philanthropists. The Cathedral of Reims, which was completely destroyed after the First World War, was rebuilt thanks to the money of Rockefeller from the United States. So it happened in the past. And it's quite normal that in those circumstances, the tycoon come up and give money to me. That's not a surprise, and that should be welcomed.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting element of philanthropy, too. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a French company called Ubisoft that does video games. It's one of the leaders also in artificial intelligence and reconstructions of historic sites. It did a video game in 2014 called Assassin's Creed Origins. I believe that's the name. Somebody's going to write in and say, well, I can't believe you didn't know the name. But it's set in medieval times in France, and a lot of it is set in Notre-Dame. In order to build this video game, they took very, very detailed 3D images of everything about the cathedral, including the spire.
And that it might help.
And that it might help in a reconstruction.
Right.
And in fact, Ubisoft is donating $500,000.
All right. There's also been that donation. We'll leave it there with that has booksellers of copies of Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. One comment on Facebook: give a bit of that money for Les Miserables. We'll be back in a moment with more. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us is Bloomberg News reporter Gregory Viscusi. Welcome back as well to New Zealand journalist Catherine Fields, U.S. journalist Anne Baghamary.
U.S. and French.
And French, I thought so, yes. And Richard Verly, Paris correspondent for Swiss newspaper Le Temps. We think Notre-Dame is eternal. How about life on Earth? Speaking of the Catholic Church, among the pilgrims for this Holy Week, the Pope had a visitor on Wednesday, Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swede who sparked those Fridays for the Future youth movement protests. She held up a small sign reading, "Join the climate strike," and there's been a series of actions that have been taking place. There's over in London this Friday, more arrests of climate activists in Paris's La Défense business district this Friday. Tear gas at one point when climate activists blocked the lobby of the bank Société Générale and picketed the headquarters of other major corporations. We talk about the material aspect in part one of our discussion of Notre-Dame. There's the immaterial, which is basically life on Earth, and these climate protests are not going away, Catherine Field.
No, and neither should they. The Paris Climate Accord was a perfectly good accord. It set in place where the world leaders should be moving to on climate, and the fact that some American president in particular has backtracked on that is, she should be going out there, and it's good to see that this next generation who's going to inherit an appalling climate, an appalling state of the earth, is out there, not just in London and Paris, and making it known that they are the new generation. They're not the generation of baby boomers who have just taken and left enormous rubbish behind. They're responsible.
It got kind of testy at the La Défense business district this morning, especially in the lobby of the Société Générale Bank, Gregory Viscouz.
Well, I think the lesson, at least in France, of the yellow vest is that if you want to get noticed, you do have to create some kind of a ruckus. You don't have to loot and destroy things, but you have to be somewhat disruptive in order to be noticed, because otherwise these protests weren't getting, at least in France, not that much coverage until this happens. And, I think that is the sad lesson. You don't have to go as far as the yellow vests and the black blocs do in destroying things, but you do have to be somewhat disruptive.
And we've heard that complaint a lot, Richard Verly, because there have been several climate protests in Paris over the past months that get completely put to the side with the images of violence at yellow vest protests.
Yes, but something has changed, I believe, and partly because of Greta Thunberg. It is the decision by many youth to take actions. And I think this is something we're seeing in all European countries. You have now a generation which associate its own destiny to climate change. And I think that's very important. And that is why for maybe our generation, it seems strange. And personally, I'm quite amazed by the capacity of Greta Thunberg to go everywhere. But it proves something. So let's consider that maybe on that specific topic, youth protesters have more to say and more to do than our generation.
Lots of reactions on the hashtag World This Week. Sometimes you just have to get off your backside and stand up. In generations to come, we'll have a lot to thank Greta Thunberg for. Anne Bagger-Murray, it's sometimes been a little bit patronizing. Oh yes, these youth, they're just looking at one issue. They don't have a holistic approach. But as Richard was saying, this is the issue, not one issue.
I think it's probably too simplistic for people to say that the kids aren't looking at this in a realistic way. They're just getting out there making a lot of noise. There's so many of them, and their point is quite valid that we didn't do it. We had the chance to move forward on the climate. I have a poster in my home from Earth Day 1970. So these issues have been around, and media attention has been cast on this for, what are we now, almost 50 years. And what have we done with this? I actually think it's wonderful justice to see our children turning around and being children of the 60s, that we all sort of thought we were going to agitate for social change. Now they're doing it, and they're turning on us to say, we don't like what you've done to our planet. It's not just in Europe either. I don't know if anybody saw the video of the kids who went in to see Senator Dianne Feinstein in San Francisco. They were going to agitate for the Green New Deal. And the video of them confronting Senator Feinstein went viral as they said, you have to vote for this, you have to vote for this. And her response to it was, I don't have to do anything. This is an issue we need to solve, and we need to solve it together. We need all of our energies. But don't come in here demanding that I do such a thing. There's lots we have to do together. And at the end of it, the smartest kid in the room put her hand up and said, Senator Feinstein, can I have an internship in your office? I want to work on this with you. Let's use your power and my energy, and let's go forward.
One question, though, the young protesters that we see, led by Greta Thunberg, are mainly from Western countries. And I'm just wondering whether she will manage to spread the movement in Asia, in Africa, in other parts of the world. That will be the big challenge ahead.
All right. Anne Bagger-Murray mentioning events in the United States. It's been a pretty raucous 24 hours. A 2-year inquiry with a redacted version that is out now for the Mueller report, 448 pages. And before the rest of us had a chance to study it, the reviews were already in.
No obstruction.
There never was, by the way, and there never will be. And we do have to get to the bottom of these things, I will say. And this should never happen. This should never happen to another president again. This hoax. This should never happen to another president again. Thank you.
All right, a hoax. The spin, by the way, just to be fair, Catherine Field, it started before the U.S. president spoke with a statement by the new Attorney General, William Barr.
Yes, I was quite surprised by this particular statement, just by the optics of it. He had him there, his two deputies, lots of flags, lots of symbols. This is the most powerful country in the world with what's meant to be the best Justice Department around, with all the greatest minds, and they're relying on symbols, flags, standing up, looking. And then immediately, for me at least, it smelt a rat. What are they hiding in this report?
Well, I mean, the only reason there's no collusion is that the president's staff doesn't listen to him. I mean, he did tell his staff to do things that would certainly have been criminal. Well, that's probably a little tough to say. I mean, let's be careful. That could potentially be criminal obstruction, but they didn't follow through. I mean, that's what saved them.
Politico has described the Mueller report as fire and fury under oath, with at least 10 instances of Trump or his White House trying to shut down cooperation with the inquiry. And by the way, there's another choice explicative to be found on the U.S. president's Twitter timeline this Friday. Is it about whether or not there was collusion with the Russians, or is it about these allegations of obstruction of justice?
Well, the Mueller investigation was meant to look into Russian influence on the U.S. electoral process, and it was meant to look at ties between Russians and the Trump campaign. But obstruction of justice, I mean, that's what they get you on. I mean, that's what they got Nixon on, basically. He had committed other high crimes and misdemeanors, but obstruction of justice was the one that got you everything else, because it is arguably the highest crime and misdemeanor in a country like America based on the rule of law. No, I think Greg was onto something here when he said that what this report showed is that it would have been a lot worse had the president's men and women done his bidding. I think the biggest takeaway from this is, and it's a little bit scary, is how unsurprising some of what the Mueller report contained was, because it's all been reported, or a lot of it has already been reported. A lot of the Times, Post, all of the great news organizations that have been digging into this, this vindicated a lot of what they said. And also, this is landing, and people are saying, oh gosh, I guess it does it validates what Bob Woodward wrote in his book. The New York Times had a great, their last takeaway of the 7 takeaways for the report was, just imagine if you were reading this cold. If you'd never known anything at all about this White House and you were reading this report, this would be a shock and a revelation. It sort of isn't.
Yeah, Donald Trump's son, it says in the report, spoke directly with WikiLeaks. They gave him the access codes. It's not even a headline story this Friday.
Well, I think the conclusion of all that exercise is that the special prosecutor, did not find striking evidence, but this is a president you cannot trust. And after all, presidency is about trust. So Trump is now saying that no collusion, no obstruction, but he did not prove, and he cannot prove, that he is a trustworthy person. And I think that's the big problem for everybody.
So there's been this subpoena. Congress wants to see the full report, even the parts that have been redacted, because there are still ongoing investigations, says Mueller. What's going to happen because of this? Is this the end of it?
No, I don't think it's the end of it, just because some of these things look bad for Trump. And as you said, there are legal cases that are advancing in New York, the New York District Court and other jurisdictions. I just do think that would be a very big mistake for any Democrats to think of impeachment. I mean, I think that would be a sort of, constitutionally wrong. It would be politically... It would backfire. I think it would be a very, very, very bad idea. It seems that they don't want to go that route. And let's hope they don't go that route.
Yet there is a role for Congress, and that seems to be what Mueller was teeing up in his report, which is that he couldn't himself. He was following Justice Department protocol and not recommending an indictment of a sitting president, but he was saying that Congress can get to the bottom of some of these questions that he, as a special prosecutor, could not. So now
two words on this: tax returns.
Well, they've been subpoenaed. The full report has been subpoenaed. And I think this is really just the beginning. And this is why the midterm elections were such terrible news for Donald Trump, because the body that is going to carry out this investigation is the U.S. House of Representatives, which now belongs to the Democrats. So I think you're going to see a lot of action.
But then everyone in America has made up their mind about Trump. So, I mean, it's not like, it's not like this is going to change much. Everyone has their view of Trump, and they're not going to change.
Let's put a pin in that. Let's remember that Greg said this.
Duly
April
noted.
19th.
Duly noted. It all started 5 years ago with envelopes stuffed with cash found in a Brasilia car wash. Now, the bribery scandal surrounding Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht has resulted in a suicide. Peru's former two-time president Alan Garcia turning a gun on himself as police were coming to arrest him. The Odebrecht scandal, which has engulfed several Latin American countries. It's also hit Africa. In the case of Alan Garcia, this was Catherine Field. At 37, he had been in the 1980s one of Latin America's youngest leaders. He too now is brought down by this scandal. It's not over yet.
No, it's not. And you think back when he first came to power, he was the darling. Everyone thought he was great. He was going to save the economy, wasn't it? And he was mad.
He was the modernizer.
Yeah. And this is the man. That phrase, "We can do business with him." And it's, again, we're seeing the need for governance, the need for keeping really on top of these people, making sure that mechanisms are in government. And really, when you look at countries across Latin America, South America, how many of them are really not up to that standard when it comes to governance and accountable governance?
How much play is this story getting in Switzerland? Because Odebrecht, according to investigative journalists, they ran this. They basically had a system for paying out the bribes, and it was run out of Switzerland.
True, and not enough place in our media. I regret to say that, probably because other stories happened that week. Some of the story was just talked about, but clearly we should devote more coverage to Odebrecht and the place and the money it has sent to Switzerland. It's not new that you have that type of company putting money in Switzerland. Our Swiss banking system is clearly not beyond doubt. I think we have many examples of that. So it's time for the media to move in, and I do hope that we will do more and we will cover more.
Lots of reactions. This reaction on Twitter. Goodbye, Alan Garcia. Such an interesting character in the Peruvian political soap opera. Not sure there's any question about whether he was corrupt or not, but a great shame that he chose suicide.
I mean, it's certainly a jinx position being president of Peru. I mean, they don't, you know.
Don't last long.
4 previous ones are implicated in corruption scandals right now. Who needs Game of Thrones when you have the UEFA Champions League? Spurs threw in a scorefest with Manchester City on Wednesday, but the real drama came Tuesday with giant killers Ajax, who after eliminating Real Madrid, defeated a Juventus side 2-1 in turn that included Cristiano Ronaldo. The old lady, as Juventus are known, undone by the youthful exuberance of the Dutch side, their captain Matthijs de Ligt, who scored the winning goal. De Ligt, who's 19 years old. And we're doing this show from Paris, and there's a team that in this city that has a budget of 500 million. Ajax estimated to have a budget of 85 million euros. There's a tale in this somewhere, isn't there?
There is a tale, and I'm loath to talk too much about football sitting opposite an Italian there, but I'll give it a go anyway. Yeah, it is, and you've seen clearly the way Paris Saint-Germain have played, that they put all their money into Neymar and Mbappe, and they just haven't had the whole team around. They haven't been able to do that. And Ajax, all I can say about them is enjoy it, because they've all now been bought. They're going to be bought. This is the last time you're going to see this wonderful youth team come together and play together and set us on fire.
Ajax making light of it all with all the scouts from powerhouses probably circling. The club posting the email address over Twitter of its director of football. That's Dutch legend Mark Overmars, whose belly slides got mixed reviews, by the way, after the win over Juventus. Yeah, it's a first time in 22 years they've come this far, and
they were the better team on the night. They were faster and sharper, and they always found space. I mean, we can get to talking to tactics. I think Juventus made a few mistakes. I think that in the last 20 minutes, when they changed their approach, they started looking dangerous, and the game could have gone differently if they'd made substitutions earlier. We can replay all that, but the point is, the Ajax players, they were faster and hungrier. And they just moved better. They found space in ways that Juventus never were able to. And they were great. They were great. There's some great young talent on the team.
The other point, the money, is that let's not forget that Tottenham, Spurs, are the only Premier League club that haven't bought a new player this season. So it's a matter of working.
And it's also the beauty of football. I think football is probably the only sport who can provide that type of story. But let's not consider Ajax is an exception. You had stories like this in the past of smaller clubs who managed through the ranks to the top of the European Cup. So they are doing wonderfully, but other clubs have done that.
And they're not
before.
alone. I mean, the youngest player on the field in that match was an 18-year-old Italian who came up through Juventus's youth system. So, I mean, they're not the only team that has a youth program.
Exactly.
They have a particularly good youth program.
It shows that when you have a spirit, and you talk about Marc Overmars, it happened that Le Temps, my newspaper, we have interviewed Marc Overmars, and he has clearly managed to instill that spirit in the team, and it proves something. Spirit is needed to win. That's probably what Paris Saint-Germain is lacking.
Yeah. And also you look at Liverpool. True. Liverpool have got that spirit now. They've brought in club. He came from Dortmund. You've got a club they want to win it this year because it's the 30th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. 96 of their fans died, and they've got that spirit, and he's carried it with them.
But one of the things that you notice as you research Ajax, and I did, and I even learned how to pronounce it in the last 30 minutes or so. But the fact is that this is not just a football club. They're not just out there playing a game. This is an institution. This is a whole management system that takes young players and forms them and gives them a spirit and a charter of ways to be and ways to play, and then sends them out into the world. It's not the only club in football that does it. It's not the only club in sport that does this. Basketball teams, football teams in America, some buy their star players, and some have smaller budgets and work through the farm system and train their people. And then they're known for being essentially feeder clubs for every other club.
Yeah, I mean,
that's another way of going.
Yeah, that's always been the criticism of clubs like Barca. That they just buy in.
No. Sorry. I think you're talking Real in that case. Barca as well. No. Barca has probably produced more in-house talent than any other. More than Ajax. I mean, Xavi, Iniesta, Messi, they all came through their youth systems. I think you're talking about Real Madrid. You're not.
No.
Real Madrid.
I understand why you're seated on opposite sides.
Barca had a very good youth program.
But let's say also we're happy for Dutch football, because Dutch football, they have been the Dutch quite unlucky losing World Cups. So we all wish that.
And I was going to say, we've looked at the bracket. There is still a chance that we could see Barcelona against Ajax in the final after the passing of the great Johan Cruyff, the two teams of his heart. That would be something.
Mm-hmm. That would be wonderful.
That would be a good final. That would be a very good final.
All right, we'll leave it there. I want to thank Richard Verly, Catherine Field, Gregory Viscusi, and Bangamary. Stay with us, though. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Yenna Lee.
Hi, Francois.
So where there's trouble, you're interested. And there was trouble at Paris's La Défense business district this Friday morning.
Indeed. I'm going to start with that story here today. More than 2,000 climate activists took over a part of La Défense today. It was a sit-in to accuse the government and really sound the alarm of not doing enough to combat climate change. Now, on French Twitter, there's been 3 major hashtags that have been trending today. Let me show you. There we go. La République des pollueurs, Republic of polluters, the President of polluters, and La Défense bloquée, which means La Défense blockaded. 3 non-profits, including Greenpeace, organised a sit-in, and they did it apparently in top secret to make sure it really made an impact today. Here's a little tweet from Greenpeace saying, "No more blah blah, act now." Take a look at some of the posters and slogans they've been using on site. Literally, they're calling it a crime scene, a climate crime scene. Basically, what they've been doing is blocking the entrances to 3 offices à La Défense, Société Générale, the headquarters of energy giants Total and EDF, to make their point. Of course, it's a risky business because civil disobedience can also lead to arrest and tear gassing. You see here, not sure it's going to work, but police have been having to use tear gas on protesters who haven't been moving from the site. There you have it. Now, across the channel, Extinction Rebellion civil disobedience actually entered its 5th day. They're calling it an international rebellion, and it's also taking place in places like Germany and Ireland. This is a picture from Dublin. Even famous people are taking to the streets. This is Emma Thompson, the actress who showed up in London. Critics are saying online, though, that she's a bit of a hypocrite for flying there from LA. Way to go, Emma, flying from LA to London.
Because
for
Greta wouldn't do it.
No, she's going to London, but
Exactly.
she's not going by plane. She's going from Rome to London.
Exactly. And harsh or not, it brings me to the story that I've seen floating around online for some time now. It's called Flygsskam. It's a Swedish word. It's flight shame, and it's spreading across Europe, notably thanks to people like Greta Thunberg. Fears over climate change have led many to rethink the way they travel, and in Sweden they've invented a new word for the shame associated with flying. And this article even goes on to say that there's a word for it in Finland, in the Netherlands, and in Germany.
Although they better fix the Eurostar and fix
Yeah,
it
really.
fast.
How did I get to the beach?
We were talking about it before we went on air, the shooting death of Northern Irish journalist Lyra McKee in Derry Thursday during rioting, and that's, raising fears of a return to the Troubles.
Indeed, 29-year-old Lyra McKee was shot in Derry ahead of the 1916 Easter Rising anniversary, and police are treating it as a terrorist incident. But online, Francois, I've been taking a look at her peers who've been paying tribute, to the investigative journalist, and it's been quite poignant, really. A determined journalist who told the stories of marginalized people and her country's troubled past. A tremendous talent that we've lost, says one user. And this journalist, a fellow journalist, who says she was a rising star of investigative journalism, according to her book publisher. And she goes on to retweet what was Lyra's last tweet herself. It's a photo of Derry last night. She just said, absolute madness. And she continues by, in this thread, sharing articles that this journalist had written. Perhaps the best way to really pay tribute to her today is to rediscover or discover some of the work she's done. For example, she wrote about growing up gay in Belfast, suicide in Northern Ireland after the Troubles, tolerance on LGBT issues and the church. It was a TED talk that she gave. And this journalist, Naomi O'Leary, ends by saying, this senseless loss is physically sickening as it's an extra punch to the gut that today is Good Friday.
Yeah, that it's Good Friday and that we have a broken down a power sharing system in Belfast, and there's that, again, what will happen after Brexit. So all that in the context as well. Many thanks, Yenna Lee. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.